Today, there's Legend Quest for me to do. There's Awakening Stage. There's Crazy Axe. There's quite a bit of stuff for me to do. But first, I want to finally get Courier's True Form. Bam, best rare unit you'll find this at this point in the game. I don't know what to talk about. I don't have anything to talk about today, so I'm kind of just hoping that people in chat can carry the conversation because nothing interesting happened in my life. Also, Devil Cat. Oh yeah, I forgot I had Dark Laser. I could probably talent Dark Laser, but god damn is Dark Laser expensive. I guess I probably should have kept Gladios now that I think about it. Oh dear god, normal wall gets 2-shot. I've knocked Crazy Axe back 3 times, I think. So just 2 more times and he'll be gone. Or just 1 more time. Okay, cool. Thank god I got an Epic Cat Fruit. Time to True Form Can. What do you mean? I'm not gonna max out the move speed because I still want to save some NP. And I'm also not gonna get Target Alien because I want to save some NP. I mean, you can use them both and get even more usage out. Amakusa, you're fucking useless. Today we're talking about Battle Cat's classes. And holy shit, I'm exhausted because my mom just had me move all of my patio furniture. But anyway, I feel like not a lot of people know anything about range classes. Or not range classes, but unit classes. Because there's so many different kinds of units. And there's a lot more to a unit than just damage. I think a lot of people miss that part. But range classifications. I might actually be able to learn something from this. Nah, this is all pretty much as I expected, honestly. Cosmo being a mix between a long-range nuker and literally anything you want. That's fair. But he's a super backliner. That's his range classification. Range classification, I think people mostly understand. Mid-ranger is this, backliner, da-da-da-da. The main thing I want to talk about is main role classifications. The consistencies that make each unit a class apart from their abilities, like high knockback counts and all that. Right. Yeah. I'll try to bring up all the important points, but right now I'm a little exhausted. I'm gonna be a little slow. Excuse me, please. But so, does it like have a list of them? Okay, so it's not like an official list, but like it goes off of these. It gives examples, gives what they do, and all that. Hydrate. Crap, I'm out of Pepsi. Let me go get a water. God damn it. I got a water. I have water. You thought I had some on me? I probably should have, considering I'm tired, but from doing stuff. Okay. So there's nukers, right? Something that I feel like a lot of people forget about nukers is that they tend to have a slowish attack rate. I feel like a lot of people just consider anything with high damage a nuker, but they're going to have a slow attack rate if they are a nuker. Otherwise, they're a different role. But nukers have a lot of damage in one hit, but relatively slow attack rate typically, like Windy, Thundia, Lasvos, all them. And then they tend to have these, but they don't have to, like Lasvos, or I guess he, has Savage Blow and stuff. So, what is considered slow because it says Bahamut? This is not Awakened Bahamut. This is Crazed Bahamut. This is Crazed Bahamut that they're talking about. They're talking about his second and first form, not this form. And then Hip Hop, I mean, I guess, yeah. And then Thundia. Like, it's fairly obvious if it's a nuker, I'd say at least. Yeah. Rushers are fast, shorter than average cooldowns, long back swings, high speed. This isn't what I'm trying to think about, though. Everybody knows nukers are good, rushers are good, everybody knows these guys, right? I feel like a lot of people actually underestimate tankers. I feel like a lot of people overlook the hell out of tankers. Is that just me? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, they don't do that much damage or whatever. But like, typically like Dogomaru, Curling, none of these guys have a lot of damage, but they do a very good job at taking damage. And so I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. They're essentially punching bags, right? Or they're extremely tanky meat shields. So they take the whole point is to take a lot of damage and to protect your other units. a lot of people don't actually acknowledge that, but they typically do have a lot of HP, durability, da 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 da. Snipers, obviously, I mean, yeah, they tend to have LD or Omni Strike or something that lets them hit far behind the front line, allowing for you to snipe the back line so that you can kill the back line without having to kill the front line or without having to get into their range. Waivers can actually sometimes do this, but they're not classified as snipers because waivers can actually clear out peons, unlike snipers will typically. So waivers are most of the time just consistent peon clearers, but sometimes they have good damage. Sometimes da 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 da. Crowd controllers, I mean, they just make sure things don't rush too much, right? Thing is, for them, it can be hard to tell when tankers should be used over meat shield with or not. Always use a meat shield unless the stage doesn't really, unless the meat shield is actively hurting you in the stage. Even if you have a tanker, meat shield. Because a lot of the time that tanker will still have more range than your meat shields. And so what you want to do is you want to protect your tanker from things that just sneak up on it. So that it's taking less damage, but still taking like the things that are already hitting it, right? So like Hades, right? He has more range than meat shields. So things like a moth could be hitting it, but things like the peons or gories or something, you can protect Hades from those things. So still meat shield when there's a tank on there. Waivers is a pseudo Omni. I think it's a better Omni, honestly, because it effectively doubles your damage as well. With normal wave, if it's mini wave, it's different. But crowd controllers, they just make sure things don't push too much. Critters are obviously helpful for metals, which is why I always say that it's hard to judge a critting Uber, specifically because most of the time they're built for metals, and so you can't really rank them like you would a typical Uber, specifically because they have the niche of critting. You know, of course there are exceptions, but meat shields, low cost, low recharge time. You know, yeah. I don't think I should have to talk about meat shields, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of people overlook the fact that meat shields are some of the most important units in the game. One of the most valuable units in the game is probably Manic Eraser, specifically because he has good HP, really good recharge time, really good speed, and he can protect your ranged units very well. Examples like using Tinker, Row, and timing for Relic B, but wanting meat shields for like Bun Bun EOC. Yeah. Definitely. Manic Eraser is greater than Dazzling. Get used to it? Yes, honestly. I cannot imagine this game without Manic Eraser. But then there's also miscellaneous role classes, right? Breakers, you know, shield piercers, barrier breakers, all that. Very useful, which is what one of the reasons why Fencer is looked at is because of his guaranteed barrier breaker. But his damage is also really good. Don't forget that. So there are stats behind these classes. Combo slaves, honestly, combo slaves are getting less and less valuable with all these new combos that are like, you know, they include good units, right? Like Mini Saurus, the research combos recently with Kaluga and Manic Dragon, you know? Like they're not as much slaves anymore. And then user rank dumps, like, yeah. Okay, so these are all the, you know, main classes, but I'd say that there are kind of subclasses. Like there's LD units, there's I don't know. There's other things, proc units and stuff like that. Like this doesn't really go into detail about like the fact that there are LD proc and just damagers. It doesn't really go into that. Cheating Heart is crazy now. Which one's Cheating Heart? I don't remember. Is that the one with Kaluga? I don't remember combo names. But then there's weird units like Radical where it's not really a tank but also not really a meat shield. I want to talk about Radical, so let's look at Battle Cat's Killer Cat. Bigler and Riceball, that's a really good one because I actually really like Bigler. And I think, why the fuck? Okay. And then Riceball is a really good meat shield as well. But I think Bigler is really underrated. I love Bigler. But yeah, like in all of these, he can actually do good work. Because unit defense up, he's obviously, okay, so tankers will typically have a much longer recharge time than simply 6 seconds. I think that's the main difference, along with his cost. His cost and recharge time make it so that he's closer to a meat shield than a tank. Meat shield and tanker. Okay, well, that's weird. At least I classify a tank as somebody with relatively long recharge time. Like, at least 10-second recharge time, I think, is what's needed for me to consider them a tanker instead of just a meat shield. But yeah, I mean, 40k HP, 6-second recharge time. Like, call him a tanker if you want, but he's a tanky meat shield as far as I'm aware. He can, like, here's the thing. I never actually use Radical whenever I use him with bad guys, the combo. But he can be used. Like, he, especially against floating and behemoths, he's actually pretty, I'd say he's pretty good. Cost is kind of like a tanker. He's more expensive than Octo. I guess that's true, but I think the recharge time is the main difference. What's Octo's recharge time? Research, whatever. Katatsu, sorry. Feels like there needs to be a combo slave and combo slave plus category. That would be like a subcategory, right? Longer recharge time. And classified as tanker, not meat shield, right? Tanker and crowd controller? With single attack, you are not crowd controlling shit. I don't like classes are confusing. All I mainly wanted this video to be was that don't underestimate somebody just because they don't have a lot of damage. Just because like people need to understand that like the damage difference between like a long ranger and a mid ranger is obviously going to be different. So like let's look at melee versus mid versus backliner, right? Death Troyar and Manic Flying. Yeah, that's definitely an example of them. So let's look at let's see. Kan's gonna be here, right? Excuse me? Oh, it's going to be Dancer Cat, isn't it? No, wait. Flasher. Is it Flasher? What the fuck is Kan's? What's the app session now? We're talking about how units are a lot more than just damage with classes. Hip hop. That's right. Idiot. I know I'm an idiot. All right. So Ken. She has 6k DPS and she's a fucking super rare. Very good. But then mid ranger. Let's see. What's a mid ranger that could probably stand up to that? Unless you get Cosmo or something like that, it's just a complete outlier. Yeah. 36? What? What do you mean 36? Is that a unit? So hold on, cat. Paris. Keyboard malfunction. Garu is a mid-ranger? Yeah, he has more than 250 range. He's like 300 or something like that, which means that KG is also mid-ranger. But I feel like I should probably talk about non-Ubers. I can talk about Ubers in a bit, but right now, definition of melee, whenever it comes to non-Ubers, can, right? And then here. This is kind of a bad comparison because of the research cost. But like, look at this. Like, these two are both very good non-Ubers, but for very different reasons. Because can get single hits of damage off and do really good amounts of damage, while also getting more money. Meanwhile, Cyborg is spammable with range and good amount of damage. And then with Backliner, what? We have Cyberpunk, which would be Hacker. Nerd. It's Nerd Cat. Okay, okay, is he a super backliner? I think Cyberpunk's a super backliner. Look for weightlifter. That's a good point. I can compare super rares to super rares. So weightlifter. Yes. Okay, so this is a little more fair of a thing. So just because Can has more damage doesn't necessarily mean that she's better than Pizza, because Pizza has more range. Pizza's range is what sets him apart from Can because Pizza can survive longer because he's not tanking like upfront hits, you know? And then backliner. What's a non-Uber backliner? Weightlifter is crowd control and Nuker in a sense. I feel like the attack rate isn't slow enough. Like attack frequency, unless the attack frequency is like 6 seconds. Like I don't know for a fact, but I feel like what do they classify it as? Really? Okay, what is the TBA requirement for a nuker? Because that seems weird. But this guy also has wave and air. Oh, right. Ken only has single targeting as well. But, like, that's not anything to do with, melee. Some melee units will have area attack. But honestly, not a lot, actually. But what I'm trying to say is that melee units will have more damage than, mid-rangers. However, damage isn't all that matters. Survivability is something you need to consider. Oh, Bath. That's right. Bathcat. Yep, there we go. Pizza has that long backswing. Is it really that long though? Ah, whatever. Look at this. Like 6 doesn't make this one a nuker. It's confusing. Nukers tend to have area attack though, so I guess that's fair. But yeah, even less damage than the mid ranger. But with 400 range, less HP, but thanks to that 400 range and still 3 knockbacks, the survivability and longer range gives it a completely different use than either of these two. So you're going to use it against like, other things. You think Bath needs a new target? I think Bath just needs better stats, which is just given by also better talents. What the fuck are these talents? Jesus Christ. But yeah, I think Bathcat's true form got fucked. Because all it got was more HP and damage. And, well, I guess quicker attack frequency. Oh, wait, the damage didn't even increase. That's funny. Like, what the fuck would Balrog be classed as, like, melee? Yeah, Balrog's a melee. Balrog, lesser demon. Lesser demon. Yeah. If only Bath could outrange Dionil. Yeah. Is Dionil that red Sleipnir? How the okay. I'm so confused by what they classify as a nuker. Does nuker really just mean high damage per hit? Is that really what nuker means according to these guys? That seems to be what they mean. Just high damage in one hit. That's all it seems to mean. Which is stupid because there's a lot of units that have a lot of damage in one hit that also attack really often. Like, I feel like if you're not doing 100,000 damage in one hit against a set trait, then you're not a nuker. My definition of a nuker is somebody like Thundia, right? Like, am I the only one that thinks that this should be the definition of nuker? With 13-second attack frequency, a shit ton of damage against their targeted trait. That's my definition of nuker. Because look at this attack frequency. And also long attack charge up, I'd say. I'd say that is what makes a nuker. Because otherwise, you're just a relative damager, I'd say. But I don't know. Everybody can have their own opinions. I'm a fucking dumbass. But anyway. You would say Nuker is a unit with potential to output damage quickly? No, not quickly. I wouldn't say quickly. Because look at Lazvos. Lazvos is the definition of Nuker. And yet his attack charge up is so long. Right? Like 2.5-second attack animation. Well, not even as long as Thundia's actually. High burst? I guess that's true, but there are also burst units. Like I'd say yeah, I don't know. It's confusing. This is kind of a weird hot topic because I don't actually know a lot about the classes. All I really wanted to say is that there are things like crowd controllers that may not have a lot of damage, like on Miyoji, Pirate, and all them. And then they'll, still have a lot of usage outside of damage. There's more to a unit than damage, And that's something that people need to consider. People that aren't as experienced in the game need to consider. This topic is strange. A unit with a ton of damage versus the targeted trait, AoE along TBA of some sort. Well, here's the thing, right? You would consider Doron a nuker? I'd say so. I'd say so because he has a long attack charge up, and then he also doesn't attack very often, considering he only attacks once, right? So by my definition, I would still consider Doron a nuker. But Balrog? Balrog's not a fucking nuker. He's just a fucking insane damager. Like, I don't think Nuker should just be what we classify as a damaging. Like, I don't think we should just classify a damaging unit as a Nuker, right? Like, am I wrong for that? Like, genuinely though, I feel like a Nuker should be classified as like something that does a lot of damage in one hit rather than just something that does a lot of damage, you know? Definitely units with low force swing and a high backswing with. What do you mean by low force swing? I feel like you mean long force swing. I feel like long force swing is something that a lot of nukers will have. But okay, so something I should also get off is that there's a difference between range classification and use classification. Balrog is a melee quote unquote nuker, right? So like you can be a mid-range nuker, you can be a melee nuker, you can be a backline nuker or whatever. But like you don't just being a melee unit doesn't really get rid of the whole nuking, you know? If it's high force swing, then usually the unit has to be nuker, otherwise it's better to bring low force swing unit. Right. You know, like I feel like in my opinion, there should be one more classification. There should be one more role. There should be one more class, and that's just general damager. You know, like Run, right? What do they classify Run as? Because like sustained DPS, just a backliner. So like, like I feel like a class that needs to be said is that not all backliners will have DPS. So if it just says backliner, then it's leaving it in the air as to whether or not she has damage over time. And I mean, of course, you can look at stats, but if you're looking at a unit just off of, like, you know, her classification, then you're not going to know if she's a damager just off of this. Like, typically, backliners won't even have that much damage. General backliner? Yeah, but like, it's not specifying, you know what I mean? Like, it's not specifying if she's a damager or a proc unit. And while she's kind of neither, she has damage. Like there are backliners that have much less damage than even just her only evolved form. So I guess I just have a problem with the fucking website. Or people in general. POTUS makes a new thing that tells the class of a unit in the game. This can get even more confusing. Something tells me they would change the classes and adjust them to their own liking. So Run probably like they would probably change backline. It's like 450 range at least. Well, wait, what is the definition of backliner? Yeah, I feel like 400 range being classified as backline is kind of meh because I feel like any backliner should be able to outrange like Lenoir. You know what I mean? And Lenoir has what 410 range, so I feel like 420 range at minimum should be backliner. Not just a flat 400, because that would mean that Dark Casley is a backliner. Backliner is relative to the stage being played. That's true. But like according to this, Dazzly is a backliner. Which I disagree with. I disagree heavy with that. And then I guess Dahlia-san is a super backliner, according to this. I feel like 600 range should be super backliner. So basically, more of the story is that don't rely on, damage for, a unit to be quote-unquote good, you know? Use things that aren't just damage. But also, I'm a fucking dumbass. Use whatever units you want. Whatever works, But don't limit yourself to damage, because there's a lot of other stuff that still works to help you out a lot. Like Can Slow. Can Slow actually works out a lot. There be stages where a Bahamut's backliner, like Siren Song with Old Horn and Sorrel. I feel like backliners shouldn't be classified as anything that outranges the opponent, Because that's the whole point in range is to, another point in range. Something that I don't think a lot of people realize about range is that it's not just outranging your opponent, it's also maximizing the amount of time before the opponent reaches you, right? So like range is not all relative because the more range you have, the longer it'll take for peons to be able to reach you. So that adds on to your survivability rather than it just being about, outranging opponents. So I don't think range is relative. I disagree with you. But if the peons have the same range, what do you mean? Like you won't always be able to constantly push things back. Let's say little bun bun, right? If there's a little bun, just because you outrange it doesn't mean you're going to be a backliner. Because a lot of things outrange little bun. But little bun can push massively, and the more range a unit has, the longer it'll take for the little bun to actually reach that unit, allowing for you to have more time to push it back and kill it before it reaches your ranged unit. And so that leads to range being more than just about outranging your opponent and being relative. It leads it more into being about survivability against things like that. Yeah, camera's not a backliner. Like backliner is not relative. Backliner should be something that's like it should be classified as something that stands behind the rest of your units, right? That's what it should be classified as, and it'll oftentimes have enough range to stand behind everything and all that. That's why your argument is it's relative to the stage. But no, like it could be relative to the stage, but no, I disagree. I disagree. That's just my opinion. Think what you want, but I disagree. Just because like range doesn't only matter for outranging certain things, right? Like look at this. Wendy obviously outranges Bun Bun, but if she didn't outrange Bun Bun as much, he would have hit her here, right? Like look at this. Whoa. Look at this. He's very up close to her. So if she didn't have as much range as she did, then she would have been hit already by him. So the general rule is less range is better stats, so it's more effective to use lower range if the range isn't necessary. Yeah, that's a general rule, but like that's also not something that actually is consistent. That's not something that's consistent, right? Because something you need to consider is that the game's inconsistent. It does some things and it does others. Look at Cameraman versus Cyborg. Cameraman has much less range, but only slightly higher damage. Is that less HP? About the same amount of HP, less speed, and longer recharge time. Again, only against floating does Cameraman actually have better stats than Cyborg. This is not a consistent thing. A huge range difference, and yet not that big of a damage difference. He has half the cost. Okay. There's other examples. I just can't think of them right now. But it's not a very consistent thing. There are so many units that have lower range that have less damage than longer ranged units. Okay, and then cost does not mean value, all right? There are some very expensive units that do not provide as much value as lesser cost units. Like that's something you need to get out of your head. To anybody listening, do not classify things as a general understanding. The game entirely is unbalanced. You need to, look deeper into it than just, oh, it's more expensive, therefore it's better. Gladios is much more expensive than fucking I'm trying to think of a general like lower cost. Like Anubis. Anubis is much cheaper than Gladios, and yet Anubis is still better with I think around the same range and more damage. Like especially with Ubers, like with rares and super rares, maybe it's less of a thing. But like with Ubers, definitely don't just sum it up to this one's cheaper, this one has more range, this one has more damage. You have to be able to look at the bigger picture and look at the unit as a whole, rather than just looking at those smaller aspects. Guess who's not sick anymore? Sweet. Not being sick anymore is great. Look at Babel and Can, yeah. In a vacuum, if a unit were too close range, it would have to make up for it in another area, and vice versa. the game's not balanced at all. That's something that I think a lot of people need to just like get over is that the game's not balanced. It's not as simple as a unit has less range, therefore it makes up for it somehow. Like there are some units like let me look at melee units, right? So let's look at Birdcat. Birdcat has like no fucking range. Good DPS, but not a lot of HP. This is at plus 90 by the way. This is at plus 90 by the way. So keep that in mind because this is much better than if it was just at like 30, 40. It yeah, it's spammable, has DPS and stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. That doesn't mean it's the same value or similar value as like pizza, right? But if you compare Bird to Craze Bird, it's more fair comparison. Is it though? Like, here's the thing. I mean, like let me look at it. Let me look at it. I'll at least see. Okay. More range, less damage, but less HP. Okay. So, yeah. So here to be fair, it is a crazed unit. So, I mean, you are right about the whole like damage thing. The damage with more range, you are technically right. But that's only whenever you're comparing these two. Generally, you will not be comparing these two. You'll be comparing Crazed Bird to fucking Pizza. Crazed Bird has not as much HP. Yeah, sure, damage. But Pizza has more damage per hit, and especially against Black, more DPS. And more range. And so, like, here's, like, you're, like, the low HP is the main unbalanced factor of Bird. Like if you compare Bird to Crazed Bird without considering any other unit, then sure, your rule applies. But if you look at the HP compared to the range compared to other units, then it's not a balanced thing, right? Howdy, faceless. Howdy, howdy. Okay, you can't say that something with more range has worse stats, right? Like it's that's kind of rough considering it's like in that case, yes, it was balanced, quote unquote, because of that. But that's only one unit compared to another unit without even considering others. There's a level 30 stacks. Check the level 50 stats. Well, here's a. Oh, to be fair, 20 plus 90 is maxed out normal bird. That is fair. So what? It had the other one had 7k DPS. So this one at level 50 has 7k DPS. It has the same DPS at max level as the max level for normal bird. So actually, you're wrong. That's a fair point. I thank you, Halucha, for providing that. That is a very fair point. But yeah, Faceless, we're just talking about how like we're talking about random shit. I'm sure you can pick up on it fast. We're seeing how range doesn't necessarily like we're saying that damage is not the only stat that matters. And then somebody's also trying to get in here saying that range dictates the rest of the stats when it doesn't. You don't mind? You like random shit? Me too. That's why I talk about random shit constantly. Unit classes are weird, that's the gist. That is the gist of it. That is the gist of it, and you should not sum any unit down to a simple rule as just because it has more range means it has less damage. Because there are going to be a lot of exceptions. And so, like, just honestly, if you want to do yourself a favor, just look at the stats of the unit and learn how to know if a unit's good just off of looking at stats. That's something I learned how to do for the most part. Of course, I am still sometimes wrong, but you're working on your custom BCU subchapter. You have my yapping on in the background. Sweet, I love it when people have my yapping on in the background. Absolutely amazing. The seasonal cast like Neil Aladdin, I haven't talked about them. But I'm gonna be honest, they all kind of suck. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I talk about the most random shit, so I mean I'm down to talk about whatever. But these guys, I mean, they all kind of suck. You thought they were way too underpowered? They are. Like I mean, this guy's only problem is his cost. If he didn't cost so much, he could be a spammable waiver. That could be somewhat similar to Bird. Low range bad stats. That is true. That is an example of that. And we're not even talking about Ubers at this point. So the game in general, not just talking about Ubers, is inconsistent. The only one do you only use Prisoner? Hold up. Let me is there a way for me to like uh wait, I guess I can just do this. Is there like a section in here in the cat dictionary that has the seasonal ones? Monthly. Okay. Ranged meat shield, fine. Honestly, this guy's actually pretty good. I've used him in Underground Labyrinth. He's not bad. Kung Fu is not the worst, but Prisoner being the only one you use. If you want to use LD, you can also use Kite. But I guess Prisoner, I guess is. I keep saying I guess is fair because, like, honestly, with his with Prisoner's LD, right to 650, 475 standing range. I did not realize the standing range was that high. But yeah, like the only time I've ever used this guy is on Little Cat. That's the only time I've ever used a Little Mohawk, at least. The subchapters you're making are meant for players that are stuck on Relic Buns, so they're at around late SOL to early UL difficulty. Honestly, I kind of wish. I can't wait until my new account is around that time because I actually really like some of those harder stages. Kite has almost no DPS, which makes him underwhelming. Yeah, that's fair. What are Kite's talents? Wait. Oh right, these guys don't have talents. I was thinking of special casts. These guys don't have talents. Yeah, Kite kind of sucks then. But this guy also kind of sucks. Like, I mean, you're only going to use him in a small amount of stages. Gentlemen Bros, you tend to use for Baku restriction, but you usually don't use it much, right? They really do. Like, I cannot wait until these guys actually get the equivalent of the special unit talents, because I hope that happens. I want these guys to be usable. Like, cost down for Neoladin or like Strengthen or something. I cost down for they're a better meat shield, all that stuff. Like these guys need talents, in order to be used. Honestly. And then gentlemen bros. Who are the gentlemen bros? Yeah, whatever. I do like these units. They're just not typically very good. I definitely wouldn't say prisoner is the best. I'd actually say ritual. I'd say Ritual is the best of the rares, just because more range than Bun, so you can still do damage against them. 100% strengthen, so 2800 DPS with 5-second recharge time, 20,000 HP, not bad, and strong against reds. So, I mean, for something with such a low recharge time and a pretty good amount of HP against reds, I mean, what? That's 2900 DPS with strengthen plus, so about like 4,000, 4,500 DPS with this guy. You can use Prisoner as Professor A DPS. Yeah, but you're not going to want to use him over other options. Like, honestly, at that point, just use Cyberpunk. What's up, Witherzone? Prisoner is the only time I'll ever use Prisoner is against Little Mohawk. And that's because is that only specials or is it specials and rares? I don't remember. Special and rare? Yeah. So against restriction, I guess I understand it, but like there's also better alternatives. Because like in 4-star SOL at least, you can just like tank them for the most part. Which like you can use Ramen, and then you can rush them down with Bahamut. You can like there's so many better ways to kill Professor A than use Prisoner. Now there's Baja Blast. I don't think Prisoner is necessary. Well, even before Bahamut got Blast, I feel like Prisoner was still kind of useless against everything other than Little Mohawk Awakens. Speaking of that, where opinions on the level plus the level cap increase for little cat stages? I think having to do those little cat stages is kind of sucks for little cats, but at the same time, it's cool because like you can make them better than they were. Like I just wish they had the plus level availability without having those stages. Like I wish instead of giving higher plus level caps with those stages, they gave you actual rewards like dark cat size or cat tickets or something, you know? Same with Corey. Corey doesn't help against Professor A. Like, do I get him after AAC or before? Who? Oh, Hitman. Sorry, I didn't see that message. Honestly, I went so long without getting Hitman. I don't even think he's that necessary. I think you really only need Courier. That's the only egg you really like need. Other than that, I mean, Hitman's good for trait list. That's about it though. And I mean, so unless you're struggling with trait lists, but by that time in the game, by the time you get Hitman, I feel like you have a lot of other options. Supercar should be your priority. Supercar is much more useful than Hitman, strictly because of like guaranteed shield pierce and stuff. It's like a mini bullet train almost, except it has much more damage. Hello, Nebo. Welcome, welcome. Supercar requires good timing. Not if you have Thunderbolt. If you have Thunderbolt cannon, or I mean, unless you're actually using it for the shield pierce, then Thunderbolt won't work. But at that point, like, it's not that great. Doesn't go through Aqua Shield. Well, that's not the only use for Supercar. I did actually name my VOD channel Brain Damage. You can go check it out. It's unfortunately it didn't let me just make the ads Brain Damage. It had to have a 06 at the end. Well, it had to have something at the end, and so I put 06. Supercar and Doron True Form is so much easier for your first time doing Luza than just Doron True Form. Yeah, Supercar helps a lot against some of those bosses, and Hitman wouldn't help as much. Supercar was what a dev used to represent himself in meetings? Really? Dude, I'm just yapping at this point. Like, the hot topic for today was kind of boring. Kind of lame, honestly. I didn't feel like opening Battle Cats for this outro since I did other things after this hot topic. But if you did enjoy, please do come back for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.